started. So hello everybody, my name is Amanda Davis. I'm the Director of Enterprise Customer Success here at Simplilearn. So whether you're joining the WebEx or the live stream on YouTube today, we've got a lot of good information for you. Before we start though, I do want to take you through a couple of things on the WebEx session, just so you know how to communicate. If you take a look at your panel, by default, all attendees are going to be muted. To ask questions of the host or any panelist, please feel free to. You just click the chat icon in the upper right corner of the WebEx, and then a chat window will appear on the lower right. And in that drop down, you can select a participant to address, or you can select host and presenter. Okay. And in the chat box, go ahead and type the question, and then just go ahead and click the send button. And we'll receive your question throughout the session today. You can also raise your hand if somebody can reach out to you. Okay. And for those of you watching on YouTube, you can also send questions via chat on YouTube, and we'll read those as well. We'll be answering questions at the end of the session today, so please be patient there, but we will answer all the questions. But feel free to also ask them throughout the session. Okay. All right, so I think we're ready to get started. But first, I'd like to introduce one of my favorite instructors and a project management expert, Bryan Campbell. All right, Bryan, are you there, ready to go? Bryan, you with us? Can't hear you. Are you muted?
Yep. I think hopefully that unmuted me. Can you hear me now, Amanda?
Yes, we can hear you. Why don't you go ahead and tell the participants here today a little bit about yourself, and we can go ahead and get started.
Okay, sounds great. Well, good morning and good evening, everyone. Thanks, Amanda, for the overview. And obviously, we're all going to be here to learn a little bit more about what's coming up with the new Project Management Body of Knowledge, the new 6th edition. So where am I from? What am I doing? I'm based here in Houston, Texas, so I'm coming to you live from sunny Texas. I've been in the project management domain for about 25 years. I've mostly focused on the information technology space, but I've worked in a large number of different organizations and industries. I've got pretty good visibility across a lot of those different verticals. I have a number of my own PMI certifications, so I'm very familiar with going through the process of getting PDUs, of maintaining my certifications, so I can definitely relate to the activities a lot of other project managers on this session are experiencing. I have my PMP, obviously, as well as my Program Management Professional Certification and the Agile Certified Professional Certification. And I've been working with Simplilearn now for about 5 years, teaching courses around the world. I specialize in project management, but also do a lot of work in the ITIL space, Lean Six Sigma, and do a lot of Agile delivery. And kind of excited about spending some time reviewing this material. We've just done a full revamp of all the Simplilearn project management certification courses, updating them for the new PMP PMBOK, and I think there's a great opportunity to get some exposure to that, particularly if you're thinking about taking the exam in the not-too-distant future. So in the webinar here, we're going to spend some time, first off, just talking about what the PMP certification is and how it can help you in your career. We'll look specifically at the 6th edition updates and talk a little bit to how those are going to affect existing project management professional certified project managers. And then we'll take a little closer look at actually what's changing between the 5th edition and the 6th edition. We'll talk about the steps necessary to move forward with taking the PMP based on the 6th edition exam. And then we'll open the floor up to a few questions, like Amanda said. So let's get started. We'll talk a bit about project management. What are some of its benefits? So what is project management? Well, the PMI defines it as including project, program, and portfolio management, as well as all the core delivery mechanisms that are going to help organizations leverage and grow and adapt to the business environment. So one of the things I think most of us have been seeing, the global economy has been growing rapidly. Organizations want to take advantage of that growth. projects are a natural extension to allow them to do that. So this is a great opportunity for project managers to kind of get involved, grow their career, because there's so much demand that's coming from this global economic growth. But it's also more than just taking advantage of growth. It's also a means for organizations to control their spending and ultimately to improve their project results, because it helps define, understand scope, manage risk, and then align our schedules and budgets to the goals of the organization. So one of the things that project management helps us do is introduce a strategic value chain, and that allows organizations and companies to get that competitive edge in their markets and industries. It connects those ideas, some opportunity that we see in the market, all the way to actually implementing and getting value from that project implementation. So one of the things organizations are seeking right now is project managers. There's a lot of projects, a lot of initiatives out there as organizations are expanding and growing. So this is a great time to be in the industry and in the profession. So we can see here from this graph, and this is sort of interesting because McKinsey & Company is a very large global consulting company. They work in a very strategic capacity with most of the largest companies in the world. And they've conducted a number of surveys, but one of the more recent ones that they reported on talked to two interesting findings. The first is during an economic expansion, when things are going well, economy is growing, senior executives report that developing project management skills are a top 3 strategic priorities. So 60% of those senior executives see project management skills being in their top 3 strategies during the time of expansion. So that's a great message for anyone considering getting into project management or anyone who's currently in the project management profession. Now, if you look at the next bar below that, we also see that during a recession, project management skills are also very valuable. Senior executives report that project management as a core competency helped them remain competitive during the 2008 recession. So remember, that was a very widespread global recession, and these senior executives identified project management as one of the reasons that they were able to remain competitive during that cycle. So great message on both sides of the equation, both times of growth and in times of recession.
Interesting, Bryan. It sounds like a career in project management is pretty recession-proof, but could you tell us a little bit about some of the opportunities in a growth market?
Yeah, that's a great question. And in fact, as you can probably see with that slide, there's lots of opportunities during a growth period and expansion. But ultimately, project management is just a great career, and it provides a lot of challenge, a lot of variety, and it's also very resilient during downturns in the economy. Now, one of the trends that the PMI has recently reported on is that there's a lot of retirement expected to occur, and many project managers who were baby boomers are now at that point where they're able to retire. And in fact, we see some of the statistics around this. A very interesting one is 90% of the project management openings in the manufacturing industry are expected to come from retirement alone. So that really tells us that there is a lot of demand for this profession. And either during times of growth, times of recession, this is a great time to get engaged, get involved in the project manager. And it's not just because there's opportunities for work, but it's a lot of fulfillment as well. Well, let's now take a little bit of time looking at reasons to gain a PMP certification. I think we just saw a couple pretty compelling ones, job opportunities. But to get your PMP, if you get your PMP, one of the first things you'll notice is you're going to have an opportunity to earn more. In fact, there's a 23% more earnings for project managers with the certification than those without. So that's a pretty compelling reason right there to make the investment to get your certification. In addition, over the last 12 months, PMI has reported that PMP holders have seen 70% of the PMP holders have seen an increase in their compensation. So if you've got a PMP, organizations are interested in keeping that talent in their organization, and they're prepared to increase compensation to keep that skill set within their organization. Another set of, I think, pretty compelling numbers are the ones in the third bullet, the average salaries. So if you're working in the U.S., the average salary for a project manager is $112,000, and it goes all the way up to $130,000 if you're living in Switzerland. So these are six-figure salaries. These are definitely the type of salaries that very seasoned senior professions often receive. So it's a good space to be in. And the other really compelling statistic is another one that came out from the PMI. Project management in the project management profession has the highest level of job satisfaction amongst leading professions like doctors and lawyers and accountants. So that's, I think, really interesting too. And the big reason for that is project managers have so much diversity, and it's such intellectually challenging and demanding work. And I think the other part is you really get an opportunity to connect solutions to real-world problems. And I think that's a space a lot of people can find a tremendous amount of fulfillment from. So there's some really good reasons to look at getting your PMP certification. So now we've got a little background on project management and the PMP. Let's talk a little bit more about what's changing in the PMBOK itself. Now, one of the first things, I know I'm using the acronym PMBOK, and I think a lot of us on the line or sessions here are pretty familiar with the term, but it stands for the Project Management Body of Knowledge. And this is the guiding source for project management professionals for planning, executing, and managing their projects. Now, the PMBOK is managed by the Project Management Institute. And as one might expect, every few years, the Project Management Institute is going to take some time to make sure that the PMBOK reflects what's going on in the market, what's going on in the profession. So they update it about every 4 to 5 years. They don't really have a specific timetable, but this is generally what we've seen since it was released back in 1996. Now, the PMI determines how to make updates based on what's called the Role Delineation Survey. So you might hear a little bit about this when you're doing some exploration about getting your PMP. You might see that reference to the RDS and how the PMBOK reflects these role delineation surveys. And just like you might expect, they're a survey that's conducted among practicing project managers, anyone registered with the PMI, as well as organizational leaders, just really understanding what trends they're seeing in the market, what trends are they seeing in the profession, and then they use that to look at the PMBOK and make some adjustments and updates. So the last update we saw was back in 2013, so it has been close to 5 years now, and we saw the initial release of this 6th edition back in September of 2017, and the PMI does that so training organizations like Simplilearn can get an opportunity to kind of look at the changes, make adjustments to their training material, and it also gives an opportunity for anyone that might have been previously studying in the 5th edition to complete their studying, take their certification exam before things roll over into the new 6th edition content. So a very important date if you're one of those individuals that has been already spending some time on their studying and practicing and preparing for the credential. The March 26th, 2018, so it's coming up this month in about 3+ weeks, the exams will no longer reflect the 5th edition content. So that's the date at which everything switches over to the 6th edition. So that's sort of your deadline if you're interested in taking the 5th edition exam. Remember that date, March 26th. So let's take a quick look at what some of these changes are. And one of the first things you'll notice, if you've had a chance to look at the new PMBOK, is there's a big emphasis on Agile practices and techniques. These techniques are now inserted across all of the different knowledge areas and process groups within the PMBOK. And it's very exciting. And in fact, in addition, there's a whole new document that comes with the PMBOK called the Agile Practice Guide. It's a separate book or reference, but it's packaged up with the PMBOK. Now, in addition, there's been 3 new processes that have been added to the PMBOK. We've got a process called Manage Process Knowledge, which is part of the Executing Process Group, Implement Risk Responses, which is part of Executing again, and then Control Resources under the Monitoring Controlling Process Group. 3 brand new processes. So if you're an existing PMP person, you've got your certification for the 5th edition, you might want to spend a little time looking at these 3 new process areas to get a little more familiarity with those. In addition, it removed the process. So the closed procurements process is now no longer part of the PMBOK framework. It doesn't mean we don't close procurement, but the PMI just recognizes that function is now transitioned to other parts of the organization. Often the procurement responsibility for closing out procurements. In addition, we're seeing some updates to a number of knowledge areas and process names. So they're doing some fine-tuning on the naming. And in addition, they've added a special section on just the project management role. And it's been updated to reflect a lot of current trends in the profession itself. All right.
Interesting. Bryan, so it sounds like there are a lot of changes to the PMBOK. Can you tell us a little bit about how that might compare to previous changes?
Sure. The PMBOK has seen a lot of changes, particularly from its original inception back in 1996. But increasingly over time, we're seeing that those changes are a little bit more about how information is structured and how the processes are defined than the addition of a lot of new content. Now, this particular release is interesting. As you saw, we've got 3 new processes that have been added and 1 that's been removed. So in the past, there were 47 processes. Now there's 49. So not a big change in new content there. But we have seen the addition of a new Agile practice guide. And I think this is a really exciting new direction for the PMBOK. It adds a lot of flexibility for project managers, how they deliver their projects. Now, of course, the PMI has a separate certification specifically for Agile projects called the Agile Certified Professional, or ACP. So this new version of the PMBOK and the Agile Practice Guide sort of provides a bridge between the more predictive and traditional project management techniques that we're pretty familiar with, and a lot of these Agile project management approaches that are gaining a lot of traction and being applied pervasively across the industries. So in fact, that's maybe, Amanda, a great segue into this next slide, talking about, the PMBOK guide is going Agile. So again, we've got this separate document, the Agile Practice Guide, and in and of itself is a pretty sizable document. It's a really important resource that can be leveraged to understand, evaluate, and use Agile techniques, as well as hybrid Agile approaches. And I think one of the things that those of us who have been working in the project management space for a number of years and have been exposed to Agile techniques, one of the things we've discovered is that it's often difficult in global enterprise organizations to apply Agile techniques exactly as they might be defined by, Ken Schwab or in Scrum. Large global enterprises often have a lot of other requirements that need to be managed as part of their project delivery. So it's difficult to introduce or implement Agile exactly the way it's defined in something like Scrum or extreme programming. So you get this hybrid. And there's a lot of great guidance in the Agile Practice Guide on how to apply these hybrid techniques and which techniques fit better in certain circumstances. So I think there's a lot of value just in that space alone with this Agile Practice Guide. Gives a big emphasis on practical application of Agile techniques, and again, emphasizing larger enterprise environments. But the focus is mostly at the project or team levels. You're not going to get a lot of direction on how to apply these techniques at the enterprise, or how to transform a large organization to move more into Agile, but it will give you really good feedback and direction on how to apply these techniques at the project and team level. So it's a really good reference. It provides some good guidance in selecting what's the best Agile life cycle for your project. So it's a great companion to go with the PMBOK. In addition, there's a lot of new tools and techniques that are being included. So each knowledge area now has Agile and adaptive techniques that can be applied. So you've kind of got a bigger collection of tools to draw upon. It gives us a lot of great references on how these techniques can be introduced, and it also gives us a little more specifics on these hybrid techniques and where to apply those in a project. What's the best way to introduce these techniques? So lots of good information there. Again, remember that the PMBOK is sort of our reference. This Agile Practice Guide is an input into that. But if you're studying for ACP, if you want to get your Agile Certified Professional certification, this would be the book that you'd be looking at almost exclusively, in addition to some of the other references that they have. So now that we've seen, Agile and how that's getting inserted into the PMBOK, let's look at some of the process area changes that are going on. The good news, there's no changes in the PMBOK process group. So if you're familiar with initiating, planning, executing, controlling, monitoring, closing, all those remain the same. They're not changing. But we have seen the addition of 3 new processes, as we just heard about earlier: manage project knowledge, implement risk responses, and control resources. So we've got 3 new processes. And then we've also seen 1 get removed. That's the closed procurements. And again, it doesn't mean closed procurements is important. It just means that, the role delineation survey that was conducted demonstrated that to a lot of project managers, they weren't that involved in closing out the procurements. It was a different functional area of the organization, maybe the procurement management team, the contract group, the accounting organization. They took more responsibility for closing out those procurements. Now, another thing that's happened is we're seeing some name updates, and I think these are helping a lot in terms of communicating more effectively what's in each of these knowledge areas. You'll see that project time management has changed to project schedule management, and we have project human resource management is now project resource management. And again, these are reflections of the fact that most of us as project managers know when we start a project, we're being asked, how much is it going to cost and when will it be done? That when will it be done question is really targeted at your schedule. So I think talking around schedule is a lot easier to relate to for a lot of stakeholders in organizations. So I think that's a good change there. And the other change, of course, is projects are more than just human resources. We have to be concerned about equipment and materials, supplies. So a project manager is really responsible for all the resource management that goes into a project. Now, we also see some changes in the processes themselves. Remember, knowledge areas, there's 10 knowledge areas. They're pretty broad. They include a lot of different processes. We can see some changes within the process names themselves. So planned stakeholder management is now planned stakeholder engagement. And that reflects the fact that we're not really managing stakeholders, we're really engaging them. Because stakeholders are kind of independent. A lot of times they can be pretty senior executives or very large groups of people, so it's difficult to manage them as a project manager, but we are expected to engage with them. Human resource management, we just heard the fact that we're going to transition to refer to that as resource management. Control communication is now monitor communications. Control risks is monitor risks. Control stakeholder engagement is monitor stakeholder engagement. So you're probably picking up a little pattern there. The PMI is aware that project managers aren't necessarily controlling a lot of these processes, but they're responsible for monitoring and adapting and responding to what they're seeing when they monitor. And then finally, we've seen a change from perform quality assurance to just manage quality. And I think that was an area that I think there was a lot of questions in the past. I know when I did a lot of instruction, people struggled a little bit with, well, what's the difference quality assurance and quality itself? So I think this is a better way to describe you're responsible for managing the quality of a project as a project manager. And then we have seen some updates and adjustments to the inputs, tools, techniques, and outputs, the ITTOs. So a couple examples: project documents now are used as a reference to any documents created during the course of a project lifecycle. There's been some groupings around data gathering, data analysis, and data representation. So that's intended to simplify the reference to those tools and techniques in each of the processes. And then we have a new section, as I mentioned earlier, for describing the role of the project manager, which really emphasizes the importance of leadership and strategy and how this ties to the PMI talent triangle. And that becomes important because after you get your PMP, you then have to support it by reporting your professional development units. So these are all sort of tying together to kind of help project managers really focus on how they're adding value, particularly on leadership and strategy in this profession.
Brian, one of the biggest challenges that many project managers face while preparing for this PMP exam is learning about inputs, tools, techniques, outcomes for each process. Will these changes make it easier or harder to prepare for the next exam?
Right. You're absolutely right. Navigating these ITTOs, or these 49 processes, is difficult, even if you have the PMBOK sitting in front of you. But obviously, the PMP is a closed-book exam, so you're not going to have that opportunity. And that really makes memorizing ITTOs very, very challenging. The good news is I think this new release of the PMBOK is going to help this a lot by using more generic terms for a lot of the input tools and techniques for each process. So now we have a generic reference like project documents. And instead of having to itemize every project document created in the PMBOK framework, we kind of have this container called project documents. So it gets a lot easier to talk about what's an input into a process, or what are the project documents being produced as part of the project management lifecycle. So I think this is going to make it easier to prepare for the exam, and I think it's going to be a lot easier to kind of reference and abstract some of these tools and techniques and make it easier to kind of manage our projects as a result. Okay, so a little deeper analysis here as we look at what are some of the changes we're seeing in the PMBOK? How does it reflect changes in the market and the profession itself? From what I'm interpreting in this at least is, really this new edition reflects some really broad societal changes. In particular, it's expanding access to millennials, and I think this is now kind of a really exciting certification option for their career path, as many of them are getting a bit more engaged both in the market and finding kind of career paths into the profession. In addition, these societal changes, I think, are very appealing to younger project managers, particularly with the addition of these Agile practice guide and the Agile techniques that we've seen. And I think as a consequence, this is going to apply or be much more interesting to a more diverse range of potential project management professionals. So this is going to kind of increase access, I think, to the project management profession to particularly minorities and other often underrepresented groups.
It's interesting, Bryan, to hear how the PMBOK is changing to meet the needs of the millennials and in the workforce. And I read that the 2017 Oxford Dictionary Word of the Year was youthquake, new word for me, but it's defined as a significant cultural, political, or social change arising from the actions or influence of young people. Is the PMBOK experiencing the impact of this?
Oh yeah, no, that's absolutely right. We can see the effect that all these young minds are having in every area of the economy and the political world. So it's no surprise that the PMI is adapting to reflect these changes. This definitely isn't your grandfather's PMBOK anymore. The PMI is working hard to make the profession accessible to a diverse range of individuals. And really, it's great to be part of a profession that can embrace and support these changes. So I'm kind of excited to be part of that myself. And I'm at a point in my career where it's kind of exciting to get some new perspectives, new inputs, and change things up. So I think this is a great time for the PMI to be introducing these changes. Okay, well now let's take just a little bit of time on what's involved in the PMP certification itself. So good news again, there are no changes in the exam content outline itself for the new 6th edition release. The duration of the exam is still 4 hours. There are 200 questions that will be asked, and of these, 25 questions are considered pre-test questions, so they'll use these for future tests. So only 175 questions are going to be scored, but you don't know which 25 questions are considered pre-test. Again, all questions are multiple choice questions. There's only one correct answer, so you'll have 4 answers, only one of which will be correct, but there might be a question of which is the best answer. So sometimes you'll have a couple questions that feel like they're pretty close. You've got to pick the one that's the best or most correct answer. Again, the prerequisites haven't changed. We still have a couple paths. If you get a bachelor's degree, you'll need 4,500 hours directing and leading project tasks, in addition to the 35 contact hours of training you need to receive, and you'll need to have 35 months of project management experience over the last 8 consecutive years. And if you've got a high school graduate degree diploma, again, you'd have the 35 contact hours, but 7,500 hours directing and leading project tasks, and that needs to occur over 60 months within the last 8 consecutive years. You can see how questions are distributed. So those 200 questions are distributed along these process groups. That's the information that the PMI provides to help prepare for the exam. So not surprising, the areas that get the heaviest emphasis are particularly around planning, executing, monitoring, controlling, because those are the areas that the project manager is going to be actively involved in. But there will be questions all around initiating how a project gets started and closing how it wraps up. So, which exams should you take? If you're in that space where you're saying, well, I've got a couple paths I could follow, I could take the 5th edition or I could take the 6th edition. If you've already invested in training, you own the PMBOK 6th edition, and you're ready to take the exam, well, your deadline's very clear. You have to get it completed by March 26th. Now, that means you need to register at the PMI.org site, submit your application, pay your examination fee, and schedule your exam. You really need to do that immediately. Remember, there is a possibility your application could be selected for audit, in which case you'd have to then send some additional information to validate that what you submitted was accurate. So you need to include a little of that time. So really, if you're on this call right now, if you're in this category, I'd really encourage you, as soon as this session's done, log into the PMI.org site and get your application submitted, pay your exam fee, and get that exam scheduled before March 26th. Now, if you're not in that space, or maybe you were just starting out your journey to get your PMP certification, this is a great time to really make the investment early in the release of the PMBOK 6th edition, because it's going to be the basis of the exam for the next 3 to 4 years. So you're going to be very current, very contemporary with your certification. So this is a great opportunity to really kind of start diving into this. And as I mentioned, there's lots of really compelling reasons, both from where the market in general is going, how this profession is getting engaged, these new Agile techniques, which make it very diverse and exciting. So again, I think this is a great time to get your PMP certification. Okay, so that's it, Amanda. I think that covers the ground on what big changes we're seeing with the recent release of the PMBOK and some of the reasons to pursue your PMP.
Thank you so much, Brian. That was really great information. And thank you, everyone, for joining. We are going to open the floor for questions. We have a few questions that came in. Before we do that, I know looks like we're going to be a little bit over on time here. So I just wanted to let everyone know that's participating today. If you look in the chat window, you'll see a coupon code is going to be posted for discounts on the PMP training if you're looking to get certified. And they can use for the PMP certification for our live virtual or e-learning course, either one. And you just apply it at checkout at www.simplilearn.com. And those codes will expire March 10th, so be sure to register before then. We do also offer group training, so if you're interested in that for your company, definitely go ahead and follow the link to contact us for corporate training solutions. We're happy to help you with that as well. The online self-learning is a 30% discount, and the live virtual classroom, we're offering a 20% discount. Okay, that starts today through March 10th. All right, so let me go ahead and just throw you a couple of questions, Brian. The first question here, it looks like we have about six questions. What is the difference between PMP and change management? That's all I was looking for that.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, that's a good question. The PMP talks a lot to change management. Obviously, as project managers, we're implementing change to some degree. Our projects are going to introduce changes to the organization, to the people who are going to use whatever solution we're implementing. So that's a big aspect of what you learn in the PMP. Now, that said, change management, organizational change readiness is a space that you can also really specialize deeply in, and there's a lot of other great training offerings there. I know Simplilearn has some good complements to that. But really the big difference between the two is as a project manager, one of the responsibilities you will have for managing a project is ensuring that change management is executed as part of your project. Now, a change manager would be a role on the project who would be responsible for ensuring these changes are communicated and effectively implemented. So as a project manager, you need to make sure that role is well defined, it's resourced, and it's budgeted budgeted and scheduled appropriately, and the change manager would actually do the work involved with communicating some of these changes.
Great, thank you. And thanks, Abdullah. He's watching us on YouTube. The next question for you, Bryan. Actually, you know what? I'll take this one. Does this presentation count for PDUs? And if so, is activity listed with PMI? And that's from Joe. Joe, no, this session is not a PDU, but we do offer plenty of them. If you want to just check out our project management category on the web, we're happy to help you out with some of those, okay? Bryan, next question. Understanding with the previous version of PMBOK, how much help do you think people need to understand the new version? That's Prashant on YouTube.
Yeah, so I think with the new version, similar to the old versions, just to give you a little bit of context, if you haven't actually seen the book yet, it's close to 1,000 pages. So this is a big tome we're going to be referencing. So you can probably appreciate, everyone, even a pretty experienced project manager, is going to need some assistance navigating through this very large book and in order to successfully pass the exam. So, my guidance would be, and it's been this way since really I took the PMBOK early on in its life cycle when it was probably a little smaller version than what we're dealing now. And but even then, the emphasis was you need to get training from someone who has been delivering this, an organization that's credible like Simplilearn, and leverage that once you finish the training. Have your own project schedule where you can identify how you're going to practice and prepare with some practice exams. And one of the things I love about Simplilearn is they've got 7 simulation exams, full-length simulation exams. These are 4 hours in duration. If you go through even half of those, you will be in great shape to take this exam. So make sure you've got a schedule you've built out. Take your training, prepare for your practice exams, take your practice exams, and then rapidly take your PMP certification exam. So the guidance is definitely you will need support, and turn to an accredited organization like Simplilearn to get the training you're going to need.
Okay, great. Thank you. Next question is from Arabindo. Forgive me if I'm not saying that well. The question is, if someone has finished the PDUs, do they need to do it again? I think he's asking if they've gotten their 5th edition exam out of the way, do they need to do it again?
Yeah, so if you've already taken your contact training, that was the 35 hours of contact training that's required to just take your PMP certification, then you're fine. I mean, that training can come a number of ways. You could be taking some college courses. You're taking a graduate degree, an MBA, and there's a course you're taking on project management. Those contact hours can also be included. So if you've already taken those contact hours, those 35 training hours, you're covered, and you would just submit that as part of the application, and you can move forward. If you are a little concerned, saying, "Gosh, I've done all my training in the 5th edition. What are the deltas between the 5th edition and 6th edition?" Really, you just saw what they are. Focused on those 3 new process areas. Take a look at the Agile Practice Guide, so you're familiar with the content there, and you'll still be in good shape for taking that 6th edition exam.
Okay. We've got 2 more questions, Bryan. One from Dale. What is the best strategy for me to retest? Should I hurry up and learn the 6th edition changes and retake the test as soon as possible after March? Or should I take my time over the next 12 months to relearn everything?
Right. So if you need to retest, you kind of made an attempt at the exam, and now you have to go back and do it again. Honestly, if you can get it in here between now and March 26th, I'd really encourage you to do it. You've already made the big investment. You'll probably feel a little more confident because you'll feel that the content's not going to be too different. But again, put your mind a little bit at ease. These aren't huge seismic changes we're talking about here. They're more calibration. So I think, armed with that, you could go in, you could revisit the 6th edition. Now remember, as a PMI member, if you become a PMI member, you will get a PDF version of this PMBOK. So you can download it right now, even as if you go to the PMI site right now. So, take a look at it. See what you think. But if you are in that situation just described, I'd probably encourage, if you feel confident, just take the next week, really bone up on the material and content of 5th edition, get your exam booked, and just make sure you get the exam completed for March 26th.
Okay, great. All right, so we're still getting a few more questions in here. So, KJ, and actually KJ, this is a good question. I started Simplilearn training, but I'm going to take the exam after March. When will your training videos be going to be updating, going to update to reflect the 6th version of the PMBOK? KJ, that should be updated today. When you go into the video, you should have an option to download the newest version, the PMBOK 6th version. I will get with you offline and just make sure you got that done. One more question for you, Bryan. If we have to renew the PMP certification, then should we have knowledge of the changes that happened in the 6th edition, then only can we renew it, or can we do without it? And then along those lines, also, do they need to have Agile experience to take the 6th edition?
Yeah, two great questions. So in answer to the first one, if you're renewing your certification, identifying your PDUs, this is a great way to get some PDUs. Download the PMI, PMBOK guide, read it, and you'll be able to claim some credits for the time you invested getting familiar with it. But it's not mandatory. You don't have to do it. There's lots of other ways to get PDUs, but this is sort of a nice way to get them. You can knock that out pretty quickly. Do you need Agile experience? No, you do not for the PMP certification. So that is going to be an input, and most of us in the project management profession have already started to see a lot of these Agile techniques get introduced into our project delivery. So this shouldn't be too unfamiliar, but there's no requirement that you have Agile-specific experience. You just need to have project management experience. That could be Agile, but it doesn't have to be.
And Bryan, one more question. I've taken the PMBOK 5 training, but I'd like to appear for this version 6 exam. Is there an advantage to doing that?
Okay, and so it sounds like they've already taken the 5th edition training, and now they're asking if they should take the 6th edition exam?
Yeah, I'm not sure if they've actually gotten certified on 5th edition. Doesn't say in the question, maybe. Diane.
Okay, well, generally speaking, I'd say if you've already made the investment in taking training that's specific to the 5th edition, and you're familiar with the structured content of that 5th edition PMBOK, I would encourage you just to pull the trigger, maybe really concentrate for a few days reviewing the material, get your examination booked. Just make sure you do it before March 26th, and get this behind you, get your PMP certification. However, if you haven't taken the training, or maybe you took it a while ago and it's not very fresh in your mind anymore, I'd give yourself a little bit more time. Take a look at the new PMBOK that just got released, the practice guide, and the areas that have changed. Just focus in that space so you're a little bit more familiar with what the differences are, and then you can schedule out your PMP for the 6th edition.
Okay, great. Last question. My PMP application has been rejected twice. How can I get some help to write my application again? To answer that question, one of our global teaching assistants is going to reach out to you. We're happy to assist with that if you need help writing it. Not going to be able to write it for you, but we can give you some pointers and how to get your application approved.
Yeah. Just to echo that, Amanda, this is a great observation. Yeah, I've reviewed many of those applications. All the Simplilearn instructors are quite familiar with this, so just share it with one of the learning professionals that you're working with Simplilearn. They'll get into the hands of someone like myself, and we'll be happy to give you some coaching and guidance.
Okay, great. All right, well, if there are no other questions, then we'll go ahead and wrap up. Thank you so much, Bryan, for And thank you, everybody, for joining, especially those of you on YouTube. We appreciate you subscribing. And you guys have the rest of a great day. Please feel free to visit us on Simplilearn.com, and we'll be happy to help you with your PMP certification exam training.
Great. Thanks, Amanda.